Hello, everyone. Welcome to Making Sense of It. I am Mona Dunkin, your moderator, and our topic today is a recap of the 10 axioms of choice theory. And an axiom is just a really small, short, catchy phrase that can be expanded almost infinitely to having different depths and different meanings to it, that it is ways of looking at it simply. So, I thought maybe we could just kind of share our knowledge with reality therapy. I started in 1996. Most of you that's here today and maybe coming in later would know the name Mary Lee Henderson. And she was someone that I just knew by reputation in the community, and she knew me. And she was doing a basic intensive training. But the way she presented it made me say, oh, well, I don't know what you're talking about, but I want to know more. Is that the way she presented it to me was that she started out and was, well, to put it mildly, she defined herself as being bossy. And that her name was Mary Lou, and sometimes, or Mary Lee was her name, and that sometimes the staff, she would overhear them say, well, I don't know what's going on, but Mary Lee is not here. This Mary Lou is here today, because she was becoming so different from what she had been previously. She was learning, lead management and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I thought, wow, if that's going to change someone to that point, I want to see what's going on too. So welcome everyone. And anyone else would like to share your years? I've been 26 years personally with reality therapy. So anyone else want to share your number of years?
I almost can't add it all. I know I got certified in 94, I believe. When I first got involved, I was actually out of the classroom. I was a professional developer at the time for a BOCES, a Board of Cooperative Educational Services. So I served many districts, and districts were always looking for discipline stuff and classroom management stuff and so on. And one of our neighboring BOCES was getting involved with choice theory. All right, I had heard about Glasser and, psychology courses and what have you. And one of my specialty areas was classroom management. That's just where I was. And I was very well trained in contingency management, in behavior mod, in all, all sorts of reinforcement pieces. Like I knew those hook, line, sinker, ran them in my classroom when I was in the classroom, whatever. So I was invited, as was the other person in a similar position, to go to the other BOCES and learn about this. And I mean, I really, poor Bob Solo, I was kind of like, I was, and Bob being Bob, and he was just like really good at it, nice about it, knew exactly what, coming as a school psychologist, he understood exactly where I was from, and we used lots of examples and whatever. And by the time I got to basic practicum, also with Bob, that I was now a believer, but I was kind of like still batting around with it. And what I think also was happening at the time, I happened to be in a group where there were a couple of us who were educators, and there were a couple of us who were counselors. And I know when we were doing role plays, I kept looking at the counselors going, how did you know to ask that? How did you even know to frame the question that way? Because that was not the work that I was trained to do by any sense. It's like, oh, okay, well, you're not a counselor. Well, but I've got to behave in this questioning way here. I know how to do it in a command versus a demand voice. I know how to do it where if you do this, you'll get that. I know how to do that. If you don't do this, then this will happen. I knew what that was about, but I proceeded and then had my advanced training with Al Katz, which brought me to all sorts of other levels of, and by the time I was in advanced practicum, like, you okay? I think I got it now. And now I'm doing workshops called disciplining differently, but I had to keep the discipline word because that was still it. So my job really became very much to say, here's the differences in, so, okay, if you want to do behavior management, if you want to do reinforcement, at least do it right. Here's what reinforcement theory says. Here's what reinforcement theory is about. So it can be webbed. I remember having this conversation with Dr. Glasser and him going at me, just, poo-poo, you're wrong. No, it's like, well, wait a minute, because I was trying to embed the needs as reinforcers, which I still kind of think it can be, but it's how they're distributed, whether it's an externally done or internally done. That really became the piece. But anyway,
yeah,
long and the short of it, then went on to be certified and became a practicum supervisor, and just kind of stayed at that and continued in that vein all through my professional development life.
20 plus years, huh?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess the best story would be that the year that we got certified was in Ireland, which was also really exciting, because of course BOCES was going, we're sending you where? It's like, it's actually cheaper than to do it. And it actually turned out to be cheaper than to go to the States somewhere at that point. But what happened was I had been hit by a car while I was there. So I was hit by a car and landed up with a fractured knee, which I'm still suffering from now to this day. But anyway, that was like that was the big thing. So I actually became a practicum supervisor on crutches and all wrapped up and on lots of pain meds, because they kept telling me it was a sprain. But anyway, got home and they went, oh my God.
Sharon, how about you? What's your years with?
Okay. In my elementary building where I was in, the community was in transition. Therefore, the school was in transition and relationships were not good. And my principal brought in Doug Naylor, Wendell will recognize that name. And he did a workshop for us for 3 days, essentially teaching the whole staff, approximately 40 people, nearly 40, about choice theory. At the end of that, our principal asked us to vote. Is this the way you want to operate the school? If you vote yes, we'll spend the next 2 days figuring out how we will implement it. And it was very successful. That's another story. I did not take a basic week for probably 2 years. And that was from Jeanette McDaniel, always intended to, but, schedules, blah, blah, things. Took it from Jeanette McDaniel, increased my appetite for more. And I did a workshop for our region, of which I met my husband there, and he carried my books to my car, type of thing. He did. And so we ended up then in December at the same basic advanced week taught by Bob Cochran. And that relationship is history from there on. But I went on for my training, and our CERT training then was at the 25th anniversary of reality therapy in Cincinnati. And that was a wonderful experience. I was certified before the conference, stayed for the conference. And, so that's how I got started on, and I've never got enough. I keep going for more. And I became senior instructor later on, all of that. And so been around and done a lot and still trying to learn more.
Right. And it's looking at how something so simple and so basic can have weight and layers to it. Yeah. So, Sue, if you would start off with the first 5, and then we'll give some input, as well as others that's watching if you have something you'd like to speak up.
So I was thinking I was going to put up the
Okay, do you want to do
axioms? That? Is that all right?
Yeah.
I think it'll make it easier if we can see them. You okay?
Well,
not yet. Nope.
Oh, there it is. Share the screen with the security. Give you screen share. Okay, you can do it now.
Now I got it. Okay. Come on. There we go. All right. So All right, so first one, the only person whose behavior we can control is our own. This one really, I mean, what I look at is, to give up trying to make people do things. That's just the simplest of how to phrase it. It's that you can't make anybody do anything.
Well, I know
You can
whenever,
encourage them, you can persuade, but you can't make anybody. And
I
that
know,
go ahead.
well, personally, whenever I begin to see this, the only person whose behavior we can control is our own. I thought, well, I know that. Everybody knows that. But it was in actually putting it down and realizing that maybe how did I behave when I was trying to control someone else and it wasn't
Right.
working. And then also it helped me to begin to see that they are getting so many messages, not only physical, but through demeanor and so forth, that if you'll just pay attention, you can learn so much more than you would have just thinking, well, I know that.
Right. Well, and it is interesting because at least in education, at least the training that I had and working with special ed kids, it's like our training really said, your job is to control them so that they don't rip the school apart. Your job is to control them so that they will learn.
Mm-hmm.
Your job is to control them so they won't hurt each other and they won't hurt themselves. They won't hurt people's belongings. It's like, all right. So then the whole idea of lead management, then when it took hold and when you realized that you couldn't really control anybody, but yet then the other piece was, well, could I bribe them? And that was an easy, well, if you do this, here's what will happen. And it's much better than if you don't do it because here's what will happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have a choice, but you really want this, not that.
So kind of from the very beginning, it's setting you up to be the teacher and the example as opposed to the controller.
Yeah. So the next one, all we can give or get from each other is information, and how we deal with that information is ours or their choice. So the idea being is that what's coming from the external world is just information. And that
Okay, you're muted. Somehow.
Sue, you're muted.
Sharon, did you have something to share about one or two?
I just think that second one is one I have to learn over and over again, because your first glance, your feelings kick in if something's said that is not pleasant or in your quality world, and that you have to stop and think, this is information.
Yeah.
I don't have to respond to it or whatever. It's my choice of what I do with it.
Good point. Good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
I have no idea what happened. No clue at all.
You're back.
Yeah, I didn't. There we go. Okay. All right. Anyway, but that the external world is outside, and that it is somebody's choice, like how they're going to behave because of the information, which also is really interesting because having trying to teach that to kids, because kids also wanted to say, well, he made me do that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have done it except he or she, or you. So then when Dr. Glesser added this, so the psychological problems that are in place and the long lasting ones are relationship problems, which is also really interesting because we're living in today, not the past, but the past in terms of relationships, and today's relationships do go back to, or the things that we do to protect ourselves because of prior relationships, and in terms of present relationships, that what's the survival stuff that we do because this happened before, or because when I'm in a relationship, these are the things that I have to worry about. So that it's really interesting to say that that's always the focus is on the relationship or relationships.
Because we packed it up and carry it with us.
Mm-hmm. And that this problem relationship is always part of our present lives. So that 3 and 4 really frame together, you know, really are together. Like what are the things and what are the things that we've learned? So for any of us who were married more than once, you learn from, you know, or had a relationship more than once, you learn from the past relationship what works, what doesn't, even though the individual is different. You know, we learn in a classroom that, you know, when I work with kids this way, establishing a relationship, it works way better than when I do this other way. So, you know, when I work with my colleagues, it works better when I work this way. When I'm with my friends, it works better this way rather than that way. So really, keeping that problem relationship in mind always helps with the day-to-day relationships that are present. And now here's the piece about what happened in the past does have a great deal to do with what we are today. So it was painful in the past. It does have a great deal to do. And in a sense, Dr. Glasser was, you know, in psychoanalysis places, you know, those folks were always looking at the past, the past, the past, the past. So this is to say that we're not going to work with the past, we're going to work with the present, but we're not forgetting about the past completely, because it does have a great deal to do with what we are today. But revisiting it over and over and over doesn't do anything. What we need to do now is improve today an important present relationship. Today, not going back when. Well, remember when, da-da-da-da. It's like, no, it's there. You've learned from it. What do you do about it now? You know, how is that impacting on us now?
And putting those 3 together so succinctly and being a part of the axioms themselves helps to keep that in the now, that we're always looking at that hurt, but it's what's happening now.
But while also giving credit, I think it's really interesting because people who struggle with choice theory always struggle with the fact, but that does have an influence on me. What happened before does have an influence on me. It's like, well, yeah. And even when we ask in a reality therapy question, well, what have you been doing? You know, what have you been doing to get what it is you want, to get at your quality world picture? And how has that been working? We're giving credit for what's happened previously, not just this last minute. What have you done to get there? How well has it worked? So it is giving credit for the past, but not living in the past. And I think that's really important, because people who struggle choice theory wise just don't, they don't want to spend all the time in the past, but they don't want to forget about it either. Well, but when that happened, you know, well, that was 35 years ago. Now what? You know, let's get on from there. All right. So Sharon, you're up now. Do you want me to put all of them up or one at a time?
One at a time, if you would, please.
There you go.
Okay. The subtitle to choice theory is A New Psychology of Personal Freedom. And I reread all these 10 axioms and his notes that he had on them. And while I've read them, I don't know how many different times, it really struck me today that in all but one, where he didn't make additional comments, he talked about how following each one of these axioms gives us more personal freedom. If we're not dealing with the past, we're free to deal with the present. Okay, wow. That type of thing. It increases the freedom. We're deciding in that relationship whether what we're willing to give up in personal freedom to have the relationship. There's always a give and take when you have a relationship. And that's negotiable, and it can change from year to year or 10-year decades as the relations form. But in each one of those, so getting on to number 6, we're driven by 5 genetic needs: survival, love and belonging, power, freedom, and fun. And all of our behaviors go to meet one of those as we deal with our quality world pictures. Number 7, We can satisfy these needs only by satisfying a picture of pictures in our quality world. And we're free to decide what our quality world pictures are and what we want to put in there, what is need fulfilling, which of those pictures, activities, people meet those 5 needs that we just listed above. And it's our choice, our freedom to choose those and what works and what doesn't work. And then we're free to choose to change them as we want or find need fulfilling.
And the beautiful thing of it is that we are selecting those pictures, even though we may not rationally know it. That you're looking around, you're saying, I want this, but I don't want that. I want this education. I want this type of work. And then the more, and at the fact that we do select them and kind of hide them away in the brain somewhere or in the wisdom heart, it's like it makes them have much more quality.
It does. And as the more we understand choice theory and understand these axioms, when we have decisions presented to us, we can deal with those decisions looking at them in reflection of the axioms type thing. Okay, 7. Okay, we've done that one. 8. All we can do from birth to death is behave. We're always choosing behaviors that meet those 5 basic needs. And this behavior is total behavior and is made up of the 4 inseparable components: acting, thinking, feelings, and physiology. While we have no direct control over the physiology and the feelings, we do have freedom to choose our actions, and we can choose our thinking, that we have control. And just saying, I am headaching today, all at once frees us from all of those constraints that we think everyone else has put on. I think I'm getting ahead of myself on the next axiom, actually. But it does that as we work at that. The acting and thinking, the ones we have direct control over, will bring the feeling and physiology along down our road of life. 9. This is the gerund one. All total behavior is designated by verbs, usually infinitives and gerunds, and named by the component that is most recognizable. If I am headaching, the component would be feeling, physiology. That's one of the back wheels. I don't have direct control over that. But knowing choice theory, I know I do have more direct control over the acting and thinking. So if I'm headaching and I don't like that, which is the feeling part, what can I think? What can I do to change that? And I know things that as a person, each one of us, that will relieve a headache. It might be involved taking a pill, but it most likely is, I'm going to get up, take a walk. I'm going to call a friend. I'm going to do something that I know meets the need. And I know my headache will go away. But using those infinitives and naming the behavior then gives you the freedom to choose to make that. And you're no longer bound up with that headache. You're free from it. And the final one. All total behavior is chosen, but we have direct control over the acting and thinking components. And I've just spoken to that one as I did number 9, because the 2 ideas go so much together as that. So all chosen behavior, everything we do is chosen, whether we are thinking it is or not. But once we understand it, we know. But we have that direct control over how we think and act and what we're going to do and continue acting and thinking to gain the most freedom we can from our lives.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. And so now I'd like our audience, including everyone that's here, if you have maybe share with us how one of these axioms or a couple of them have really impacted your life and how you have seen it or used it or what great benefit it has brought about. Don't all speak at once.
They're thinking about it.
Yeah, thinking about it, maybe reading over it again. It was one that kind of impacted you as we were just casually re-evaluating them.
I'd like to talk about.
Go ahead, Alice.
Go ahead, Alice.
No, just briefly. I think number 6, the 5 genetic needs, is it has helped me understand myself and has helped me understand the people in my life. So I really, for me, that's like square one with respect to what I learned about, Glasser and how it's been helpful in my life. So yeah, so there.
Thank you.
Yeah, help us to understand us better. And maybe that in that genes being filtered down, we may have got a gene that, oh no. But,
I can try to add something. I work with a lot of eating disorder young women and body image issued with young women, and working with the needs. We try to figure out which need the eating disorder is trying to fill in for, and that it usually becomes power or security, because at some point they don't feel safe, they don't feel in charge, so there's of their own security. So the eating disorder can step in and say, I've got this, I'm going to take care of you, we're going to make sure that you're going to survive whatever, say, trauma they may be experiencing. And so when I work with them and use the 5 genetic needs, we go, how much fun are you having? Well, they're not. And it's like, well, the eating disorder says I can't go out because I'm too fat. So I have to tell my friends no. How much freedom do you have? Well, none. The eating disorder really takes away my freedom. But then when in love and belonging, it's not coming from themselves. They're looking for love and belonging from outside of them. But when we get to the power and the security piece, they praise the eating disorder as being giving to them something that they lack, filling in. And so what we of course work on is, what can we do, and how else can you get power? How else can you feel secure? And they really, every time I work with them with the needs, they write them all down. They're very, it connects for them. And they like that. And it usually is very helpful as we bat around ideas on how else they can get power and freedom. So
yeah,
those are good.
it's those pesky little feelings that mess things up.
Well, what's really interesting is you're talking about it that way. It's saying, that you are in control of your behavior, and it starts to say, as Alice is talking about the needs, and then, so if it all boils down to the needs, what are we doing to get the needs met? And I think it was Kim Olver who I learned it from, and she may have gotten it from somebody else, that she had the idea of jars, that if you think about each need being in a jar and how full is the jar, and what's your profile, like how much do you need in the jar? So it's just like a real, just a visual aspect of it, and if you look at it, so the way Diane, right?
Yes.
The way Diane described it, it's like, so, okay, so the power need, the jar is only this full, but we want it to be this full. And the idea being is you're in control of your behavior. What else can you do to get it higher? How do which store do you shop in that you can get your jar more full? So it's actually it's a nice metaphor. I don't know.
You have to replace, and I like that. Except again, if you look at eating disorders, they fill in the jar for you.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
They fill in the jar, and so this person feels like it's full, and my quality world, my pictures, they're in their quality world pictures, they're all messed up because they're thin, and thin is success, and thin is equal to love and belonging, and thin is love. And so So that's another, you
Yeah,
know, that's
interesting.
another year. But
Well, maybe I wonder, if you use the metaphor, maybe it's an issue that the jar is cracked, or there's a leak on the bottom of it, or something, or
it's a
the
different
lid
color, or
won't go on. Yeah,
or it's a
something.
different, because it's a pseudo self, it's a false full, and so it's ineffective, it's inefficient, because the leak maybe is their health is deteriorating.
Right.
But
Go ahead.
But it's also looking at the fact that need is to be needs fulfilling. And, I tell people quite frequently, you may be throwing up full, but you're not fulfilled. You may be literally satiated with the food, with the titillating, with the robbing, raping, maiming, pillaging, with the power. And you throw up, when you're up here, you're ready to throw up, you're so full, but it is not fulfilling.
Right.
Okay, I got it. Okay.
Right.
And it's
And I
beginning
think,
to look at what is fulfilling, what is needing. And I know in Pete's pathogram that has all the needs, and that you your own self, you are the one that weighs and measures that I am good at this, I am not so good at that. And you're the one that puts it down. And then he has several questions. And one of the last questions is, are you okay with that?
Right.
And sometimes we have put these things down. That's what I am. I mean, I've chosen that, but whenever I look at it, no, I'm not okay with it. So then you kind of go back to the very beginning, because you do have those choices. You have more choices than you've given yourself credit for. Then go back and rethink. Don't refeel,
Okay,
but go back and rethink.
right. And I'm just saying the more, because I've had this concept too, Sue, for years. I don't know, like you say, where it all came from. But we need to know that our needs are fulfilled moment to moment. No need stays fulfilled.
Right.
And we can have a lot of power, but we've denied our belonging because we've left our family behind to do this business thing. Okay. But we can deny love and belonging only so long. It
Right.
has to rise up and get filled and be filled. And so they're always jiggling back and forth with the amount of which need is being met at any one time. You find an activity that needs 3 of them. Wow, your scale's more or less balanced, and that's kind of where we look. We look for as many things that we can do that meets multiple needs. Not, they don't all, of course, but that can be help you. And while their jar is full, overeating, you were pretty much saying it, Diane. Isn't it an effective way to have my power filled, or would there be a more effective way, that they would trade out?
Yes, because they'll say, I am so powerful. I can resist having lunch and dinner and dessert. I resisted. While that girl over there, I saw her eat a piece of pizza and have a beer, and I would never do that. I am better than that. And they fill themselves with this, and this false sense of power. But of course, I always struggle with that meeting multiple needs, because I feel that's great. As Mona, you were saying, they're full of
Satiated, full,
satiated with all that, not with pizza and beer, but they're full of power that they could resist. They're so awesome that they can resist. And then, but then at the expense of what? You pass out, your bones are brittle, you die. You're hungry, you lose friends and relationships. You lose freedom because somebody's going to swoop you up and hospitalize you. All the things that so yeah, that's always a tricky place for me and my clients, is how do we look at those multiple needs, because they really they hold on to that power with all their mind.
We go back to thinking. And reality therapy and choice theory is really big about the thinking, and in the right way of using it, it's very powerful. That our thoughts in and of themselves are not neutral. And so every thought we have contributes to truth or illusion.
Okay, she's on something.
It contributes to peace or to war. It contributes to love or to fear.
Right.
Inspiration I had about 3 nights ago, and I wrote this down.
Well, good for you. How meaningful. Diane, I was also thinking, if their power is full, what else do they do for power? Where else in their lives do they feel recognition?
We have to go there. We have to find it.
Right, exactly. That would be where I would go with someone.
Yeah.
And I know Dr. Glasser said at one time, anorexics was the most difficult clients to work with.
It ain't easy, but the truth and illusion, Mona, yes.
Yes. Yes.
Because illusion, their quality world pictures are a lot of illusion.
Right. And so therefore my thoughts about food are not neutral.
Oh,
My thoughts about not eating, about proving that I don't have to have, that they're not equal. They're not neutral. And actually it's self-destructing.
Yeah, it goes all directions. And but choice theory has helped me. I've stayed as true as I can to these axioms, and it's so far so good, but it's because I think that they work if you piece them. I think that's piecemeal, because again, the illusion piece is very big. The illusion, the delusion, this false information that they are pursuing, their quality world pictures are just like they're off. And until you get those kind of in line, but what I'm going to go back to 6 and 7. So 7, I was thinking, what comes first? Do the quality world pictures come first, and then we behave to meet the needs that I guess the quality world picture must come first. Are you guys following me?
Right. Well, if you take a newborn, the newborn has very little in their brain, but they have those basic things. But as the parent cares for them, that mother's or dad's picture becomes essential to them. That's in their quality world. I think from birth, we begin to develop those quality world pictures as we grow, and they change as we have different stages of our lives. Some, mom stays in all of our quality worlds for the most part, whatever, but, they can be added to and deleted. But yeah.
Okay, so those would be first. So I think if those are disjointed and are more illusion, somehow we have, Glasser, the theory has to go in and work with this illusion, real versus truth versus illusion, real versus not real, fantasy. So maybe it begins with the quality world, with the needs meeting, but I think I go in with needs. I'm thinking about this now. I tend to go in with needs first, because
they're genetic.
because the quality world confounds me. So the quality world of many of my clients just confounds me. And if I go after their quality world pictures, they will reject the whole process.
Exactly.
Well, except, I start to wonder, is there anything wrong with having a quality world picture of being thin? The idea being, though, is what do we mean by thin?
Be healthy
How
in the
thin?
process.
So like, so their quality world picture of thin is emaciated. It's like, all right, now let's look at it and see. And that's why, people have put up a fuss for a very long time about, who are the models that these kids are looking at? you know, and is that real? Like, so how thin is thin? And then it's, so you can get at the quality world picture, but what happens with the quality world picture where it's an acceptable, you know, it's an acceptable level. So, you know, you want to be thin, but what do we mean by thin? And is there beyond being, you know, are you too thin?
And
Are
that's
you
where
too
I
fat?
use security. That's where I go after this. That's how I guess I'm saying I back into quality world.
Yeah.
By saying, oh, well, let's go with security. You're over exercising, you're not eating, you're binging and purging, you're using laxatives.
Right.
Thin, and I want to be thin, but I also want to be fit.
There you go.
So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
go
yeah, yeah,
after
Yeah,
the-
you're balancing.
yeah.
So the secure that gets them. They start to think about that they're not meeting their need for security of their health.
Yeah.
They might be thin. You can be as thin as you want, but what are your numbers? You know, what is your blood work?
Right,
What's
right,
how do you
right.
feel? You know,
Well, it's not just being thin, it's being thin and
Thin.
healthy.
and
You
so
know,
I can
thin and fit, that becomes the other piece. So now you look at conflicting needs, you know, it's like, yeah.
And
you
then
know,
they
so
adjust the quality. Then I can slowly but surely see that quality world
yeah.
picture
Yeah.
start to shift more
Right.
to truth.
Right.
So I'm saying I kind of think I go after the needs first because the pictures are wonky.
Well,
Right.
Well, the thing
and
of it,
I think for, like, it's interesting because when Sharon and I working with educators, very much educators have always been trained for behavior. You know, it's like, we're not going with quality world, you know, oh, so you want to be a good student. Oh, so you want to, it's like, no, what are you doing? You know, it's always about the, what are you doing? You know, and it's like, what are you thinking when you're doing, we can talk about thinking, but, you know, educators, they're not about quality world pictures, but then yet they're about rules. But then when you start to say, well, let's frame the rules as a class constitution of who do we want to be? What do we want to be like? All of a sudden it's like, huh, maybe, you know, so it's like, where do you get at it? You know, do you have to start with quality world? You know, so you're starting with needs. Teachers very often are starting with behavior. So what's, you know, what's that behavior helping you to get? You know, is that really what were you hoping to get when you did that? You know, so it sounds half-assed backwards, but for educators, that's their frame. I'm overgeneralizing, but for the most part.
Right. Mhm.
and Carlene would talk about Dr. Glasser and his deep thinking and meditating and looking at things. So in his genius, he put them in the order that he thought was best, or, you know, was more that would follow suit to make it more needs fulfilling.
Mhm.
To let us know how much further down there that all total behavior is chosen. If that doesn't give you power, what does?
Yep.
And to let the kids know you're choosing to hurt yourself or you're choosing to not. And it's my hope and trust and prayer for you that you will choose to take care of yourself, because you are a wonderful person. So thank everyone for being here. And
So I was going to make a comment. Mona,
Okay.
Dave from Cleveland Heights.
hey, Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I taught at Cleveland Heights High School, Dr. Glasser's alma mater, 1968 to 2003, 35 years. And at John Carroll University, I was an adjunct professor, educational psychology, and taught also a course, Principles of Classroom Behavior Management. You may be familiar with James Levin and James Nolan, Principles of Classroom Management, Professional Decision-Making Model, 6th edition. Dr. Glasser mentions the triplets. And I would do this all the time. In his system for establishing suitable student behavior, William Glasser proposed that teachers direct students to appropriate behavior through the use of 3 questions as 3 triplets. And I would have these written down on an index card and go over to a student and put it right there in front of their eyes. What are you doing? Is it against not the rules we were talking about that. I had probably 15, 20 personal conversations with Dr. Glasser because his brother lived in University Heights, and I inducted him in the Hall of Fame image makers back in 1987.
Okay,
Is
what
it
are the
against
three
the rules?
questions? What are the three questions?
Is it against the rules? Instead, say, is it against the policies, procedures, and practices? And 3, what should you be doing? Very good. I didn't have many behavior problems 35 years because biology class, 12, 15 students, did mainly the microscope lab, and the labs and the lectures we back and forth. And then building classroom discipline, C.M. Charles, I used that textbook for my behavior management class, and chapter 8 is devoted to how does William Glasser use choice theory and quality education to establish class discipline and management, chapter 8.
Okay.
Excellent.
Well, thanks for that addition. We're going to stop the recording. And thanks for everyone for being here and for your inputs.